The NATO Joint Training Range hummed with tension. Sergeant Mason, a towering British sniper, placed his L-115A3 on the bench with theatrical flair. His smirk widened as he locked eyes with the American operator across from him. "Want to try love?" Laughter erupted from his team. Some of the American soldiers shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact. Lieutenant Sarah Kane stood motionless. Her blonde hair pulled back tight, green eyes, steady expression unreadable. She didn't blink, didn't flinch. If you've ever been mocked because someone thought you weren't good enough, you'll want to watch until the end. Hit like and subscribe to support those who were underestimated but proved everyone wrong. Allo 500 hours. Sarah's alarm didn't sound because she never needed one. Her eyes opened exactly at dawn, the same way they had for 15 years. She laced her boots in the dark, stepped outside, and began her 6-mile run around the base perimeter. Her breathing was controlled, rhythmic. Her heart rate never climbed above 57 beats per minute, even on the hills. The morning light caught her face as she rounded the final stretch. No music, no distractions. Just the sound of her footfalls and the distant hum of generators powering up for the day. In the mess hall, she chose her seat carefully. Back against the wall, eyes on the door. Her position gave her a reflected view of the entire room through the window glass. Old habits, the kind that kept you alive. She ate slowly, methodically. Oatmeal black coffee, 2 hard-boiled eggs. While she ate, her left hand drifted to her boot fingers, brushing the small blade tucked inside. A reflex check. Muscle memory from operations where a hidden knife meant the difference between extraction and burial. A young sergeant whispered to his buddy at the next table, "She's logistics, not a shooter." His friend snorted. "Probably never fired anything bigger than a 9mm. One of them knocked over an ammo box near Sarah's table. Brass casings scattered across the floor. They expected her to ignore it or ask for help. Instead, she knelt and began sorting the rounds by caliber and condition, her fingers moving with practiced precision. Her eyes never left the soldiers' faces. They stopped laughing. Later that morning, an older gunner named Williams approached her near the armory. "Hey, Kane, got a question." He scratched his beard. "You ever work with a Barrett 50 cal at 1,200 meters? Curious about the recoil compensation at that range." Sarah didn't hesitate. Wind drift is your primary concern at that distance. For every 5-mile-per-hour crosswind, you're looking at roughly 6 inches of deviation. Scope adjustment needs to account for bullet drop about 10 mils depending on your load. And the ballistics table changes with temperature and humidity, so you calculate fresh every time. William's eyebrows lifted. "That's not book knowledge." She met his gaze. "No, it's not." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly and walked away. In her bunk that night, Sarah sat on the edge of her cot, cleaning her sidearm. The repetitive motion calmed her. Disassemble, wipe oil, reassemble. Her hands moved without conscious thought. On her left wrist, barely visible beneath her watch, was a tattoo. An Ouroboros, a snake eating its own tail, rendered in faded black ink. 7 tiny stars circled it, so small most people never noticed them. She traced the mark with her thumb, remembering. Across the base in the IT hub, Specialist Ramirez scrolled through personnel files. He'd been tasked with updating security clearances for the joint training exercise. Sarah Kane's file loaded on his screen. Standard information. Service dates, assignments, commendations. Then a gap. 2014 to 2019. 5 years marked only with the word classified. Ramirez frowned. He'd seen redacted sections before, but never an entire 5-year block. He ran a secondary search. Access denied. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the screen. Who was Sarah Kane, and what had she done for 5 years that required that level of secrecy? Outside, the night air was cold. Sarah stood alone on the rifle range, staring at the distant targets barely visible in the darkness. The British contingent arrived in 3 armored transports, their presence announced by the roar of diesel engines and the snap of Union Jack flags. 12 operators from the Special Air Service dressed in desert camouflage, their equipment gleaming with meticulous care. At the front of the formation stood Sergeant Mason, 6'3", shoulders like a rugby player jaw, sharp enough to cut glass. He carried himself with the confidence of a man who'd never missed a shot that mattered. His reputation preceded him: 200 confirmed kills, across 3 continents decorated 4 times for marksmanship excellence. The American and British commanders shook hands, exchanged pleasantries. The operators sized each other up the way predators do when sharing hunting grounds. Mason's eyes swept across the Americans, dismissing most of them instantly. Then he saw Sarah, small, almost delicate, compared to the men around her. She stood near the armory inspecting a rifle scope. He nudged his teammate. "That one's a bird. What's she doing here, admin work?" His teammate shrugged. "Americans let anyone join now, mate." Mason's smirk widened. The next morning, both teams gathered at the long-range rifle course. Targets were set at 400, 800, and 1200 meters. The wind was picking up, gusting from the northwest at 8 miles per hour. Difficult conditions, perfect for showing off. Mason volunteered first. He settled into position with his L115A3, adjusting his bipod with theatrical precision. The crowd watched as he controlled his breathing, his finger curling around the trigger. Bang, pause, bang, pause, bang, pause, bang, pause, bang. 5 shots, all within a 3-inch group at 1200 meters. The spotters called it out over the radio, and the British operators cheered. Even some of the Americans nodded with grudging respect. Mason stood dusted off his knees and handed his rifle to his spotter. Then he turned, scanning the crowd until he found Sarah. He walked straight toward her, that infuriating smirk still plastered across his face. "Want to try, sweetheart?" The words hung in the air like a challenge and an insult combined. The British operators laughed loudly. A few American soldiers joined in, uncomfortable but unwilling to defend someone they barely knew. Sarah said nothing. She picked up her rifle, an older Barrett M82A1, its paint chipped and worn. She pulled a cleaning cloth from her pocket and began wiping the scope lens with slow, deliberate strokes. Mason leaned against the shooting bench. "No shame in sitting this one out, love. Long-range work isn't for everyone." Still, Sarah didn't respond. She checked the chamber, inspected the magazine, ran her fingers along the barrel as if reading Braille. One of the American sergeants muttered to his buddy, "She won't even hit the target. This is embarrassing." Another whispered back, "Why'd they even bring her here?" In the back of the crowd, Ramirez stood with his tablet, pretending to check equipment logs. But his mind was elsewhere. He'd spent the previous night digging deeper into Sarah's file, using access codes he probably shouldn't have. He'd found something. A single reference in an archived Joint Special Operations Command report, a code-named Ghost Unit, 7 operators, no official records, no mission logs, just a notation: extreme prejudice authorized, targets eliminated, classified, and that tattoo on Sarah's wrist, the Ouroboros with 7 stars. He'd seen it before briefly on another operator's file, a man who died in Yemen in 2018. His file also had a 5-year gap. Ramirez looked up from his tablet, watching Sarah prepare her rifle. His pulse quickened. Mason raised his voice, playing to the crowd now. "Tell you what, since I'm a gentleman, if you hit the target, any part of it, I'll salute you in front of everyone here. But if you miss," he grinned, "you bring me and my boys coffee every morning for a week. Deal?" The crowd erupted in cheers and whistles. Sarah finally looked up. Her green eyes locked onto Mason's. She didn't smile, didn't frown. She simply nodded once. Then she walked to the firing line. Sarah knelt beside the shooting mat, her movements economical and precise. She unslung the Barrett, setting it down with care that bordered on reverence. The weapon was old, its serial number worn almost smooth, but every component was immaculate. Mason watched from 10 feet away, arms crossed, that smirk still etched on his face. His teammates whispered jokes. The Americans shifted nervously, some already wincing at the anticipated humiliation. Sarah dropped prone. She adjusted the bipod legs with tiny twists, ensuring perfect stability. Her left hand reached into her pocket, pulling out a small notepad and pencil. She licked her finger, held it up, feeling the wind. Then she scribbled numbers. Wind speed, direction, temperature, barometric pressure. Someone in the crowd coughed. Another checked his watch. She chambered around. The metallic click echoed across the range. A British operator leaned toward Mason. "She's taking bloody forever, mate." Hunter Mason chuckled. "Stalling. Hoping we'll get bored and forget about it." Sarah pressed her cheek against the stock. Her right eye found the scope. The target, a white circle with a black bullseye, shimmered in the heat distortion at 1200 meters. At this distance, the target looked smaller than a quarter held at arm's length. Her breathing slowed. Inhale for 4 seconds, hold for 2, exhale for 6. Her heart rate dropped. 60 beats per minute, then 58, then 55. The world narrowed, the crowd disappeared. The wind became data. The target became geometry. Her finger touched the trigger. Not pulling, just resting. Feeling the resistance, learning the breakpoint. Then without warning she fired. The Barrett roared. The recoil drove her shoulder back, but her body absorbed it like water absorbing a stone. No flinch, no compensation. 1,200 meters away, the spotters behind high-powered scopes went silent. The radio crackled. Stand by. A pause. Jesus Christ. Dead center. Perfect bullseye. The crowd erupted. Americans whooped. Even some of the British operators looked impressed. Mason's smirk faltered for just a moment. Lucky shot, he said loudly enough for everyone to hear. Let's see her do it again. Sarah didn't acknowledge him. She ejected the spent casing chambered. Another round recalculated her wind call with a glance at the flags downrange. She fired again. Bullseye. Same hole. The crowd's cheers grew louder. Mason's jaw tightened. Sarah fired a third time, then a fourth, then a fifth. Each shot took less than 8 seconds to set up and execute. No hesitation, no wasted motion. Her breathing never changed. Her heart rate never spiked. The radio operator's voice shook. All 5 shots, single hole, diameter less than 2 inches. Silence descended on the range like a curtain dropping. The kind of silence that happens when people witness something that shouldn't be possible. One of the older American sergeants, a veteran with 23 years in, stepped closer to the spotting scope. He looked through it himself, adjusting the focus. Then he straightened his face pale. That's ghost unit precision, he whispered. The words spread through the crowd like electricity. Heads turned. Eyes widened. The British operators stopped joking. Even Mason's smirk vanished completely. Ramirez, standing at the back with his tablet, felt his stomach drop. Ghost unit. The rumor every Tier 1 operator had heard, but none could confirm. 7 shooters, no names, no records, only results. They operated in the gaps between official missions, eliminating targets so sensitive that even acknowledging their existence was classified. They were ghosts because officially they didn't exist. Sarah stood slowly, dusting off her knees. She saved her weapon, removed the magazine, checked the chamber. Then she turned to face Mason. He stood frozen, his face red, his fists clenched. The crowd watched him waiting. Sarah walked toward him, stopping 3 feet away. She didn't gloat, didn't smile. Her expression remained neutral, almost bored. Coffee, she said quietly. I take mine black. Someone in the crowd laughed. Then another. Then the entire range erupted in laughter and applause. Mason's mouth opened, then closed. He looked around at his teammates, at the Americans at the target's downrange. Then slowly his shoulders slumped. He'd been beaten, utterly and completely, by someone he'd dismissed as a logistics clerk. Sarah walked past him, carrying her rifle back toward the armory. Behind her, the whispers began. Who is she? What unit was she with? Did he say ghost unit? Ramirez clutched his tablet tighter, his mind racing. Mason stood like a statue, his face cycling through shades of crimson. The laughter around him faded into uncomfortable silence as people realized they were witnessing something more than a lost bet. They were watching a legend crumble. Sergeant Williams, the older American gunner who'd questioned Sarah earlier, stepped forward. His voice carried authority. That grouping, he shook his head slowly. That's the cleanest I've ever seen. In 30 years of service, I've never witnessed anything like it. A British operator, younger than Mason but clearly shaken, spoke up. The wind was gusting 8 miles per hour. Variable. She didn't even use a wind meter. Just felt it. Mason finally found his voice. It was luck. Had to be. 5 shots. Williams turned on him. 5 identical shots in variable wind at 1,200 meters. That's not luck, Sergeant. That's something else entirely. The crowd parted suddenly. Everyone snapped to attention. General Morrison approached from the command observation post. He was 63, silver-haired, with shoulders that still carried the strength of his youth. 3 stars on his collar, ribbons on his chest that told stories of wars most people had forgotten. He walked slowly, deliberately, his eyes fixed on Sarah's retreating figure near the armory. "At ease," he said, though no one relaxed. Morrison stopped at the shooting line. He examined the Barrett Sarah had used, running his fingers along the worn receiver. Then he picked up her notepad, studying the calculations she'd scribbled. "Perfect," he murmured. "Every variable accounted for." He turned to face the assembled operators. The British contingent stood at attention. The Americans waited confused. Morrison rolled up his right sleeve slowly, deliberately. On his forearm, rendered in the same faded black ink, was an Ouroboros, a snake consuming its own tail, circled by 7 tiny stars. The older operators recognized it immediately. Their faces went pale. "This mark," Morrison said, his voice carrying across the range, "belongs to 7 people. 7 shooters who don't exist in any official record. 7 operators who've eliminated targets that threatened our nation's security in ways the public will never know." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "These 7 people have a combined 437 confirmed kills, in deserts, jungles, mountains, and cities, from distances that would make your training instructors weep." Mason's face had gone from red to white. Morrison continued. "Lieutenant Sarah Kane holds the record among them. Her longest confirmed kill, 2,475 meters. Helmand Province, Afghanistan, 2016. 1 shot, 1 kill, in 40-mile-per-hour winds." One gasp rippled through the crowd. "She eliminated a high-value target that 3 Predator drones and 2 SEAL teams couldn't reach. She did it with a rifle older than most of you, from a position so exposed that extraction seemed impossible." Morrison's eyes found Mason. "She is one of the deadliest shooters in SEAL history, and you, Sergeant Mason, just asked her if she wanted to try." The silence was absolute. Even the wind seemed to stop. Morrison's expression softened slightly. "But here's what you need to understand. She didn't embarrass you to stroke her ego. She did it because you forced her hand, because you made assumptions based on gender rather than capability. And that, gentlemen, is the kind of thinking that gets people killed in the field." He let that sink in for a moment. Lieutenant Kane has been operating under deep cover for 5 years. Her identity was classified for her protection and ours. That classification was lifted 2 days ago because the threats she neutralized are no longer active. Morrison turned to the British contingent. "Sergeant Mason, front and center." Mason walked forward stiffly, his face a mask of humiliation and shock. "You made a bet," Morrison said. "Honor it." Mason's throat worked. He looked toward the armory where Sarah had disappeared. Then slowly he raised his right hand to his forehead in a crisp salute. He held it for 3 full seconds before dropping it. "Dismissed," Morrison said. The crowd dispersed slowly, whispers erupting like wildfire. Your heart racing, watching truth explode from beneath layers of secrecy. Share this video with anyone who's ever been underestimated so they know what real power looks like. 3 days later, the base held a formal ceremony. Both American and British contingents assembled in dress uniforms, their boots polished, ribbons aligned. The morning sun cast long shadows across the parade ground. Sarah stood at attention among the other operators, her uniform crisp, her expression neutral. She'd tried to convince Morrison that this wasn't necessary, but he'd overruled her. "Some things need to be public," he'd said, "for morale, for justice." Mason stood with his British team, his face carefully blank. The past 3 days had been hell for him. His teammates had stopped joking. His commanders had delivered quiet but firm reprimands. The story had spread through the base like fire through dry grass. Morrison took the podium. Behind him, the American and British flags snapped in the wind. "We gather today," he began, "not just to honor skill, but to honor sacrifice. To honor those who serve in silence, who risk everything while receiving no recognition, who live and sometimes die in the shadows so that others may live in the light." He gestured for Sarah to step forward. She moved with military precision, stopping exactly 3 feet from the podium. Lieutenant Sarah Kane served with SEAL Team 6 from 2014 to 2019. During those 5 years, she participated in 37 classified operations across 14 countries. She neutralized 43 high-value targets, including 5 that were considered untouchable by conventional means. Morrison's voice strengthened. She holds the longest confirmed kill shot in SEAL history, 2,475 meters. That's over 1.5 miles. In hostile conditions, with enemy forces closing on her position. He paused. After that shot, she remained in position for 6 hours, providing overwatch for the extraction team. She didn't leave until every operator was safe. Then she walked 12 miles through enemy territory to reach the extraction point, alone. The assembled operators were silent, transfixed. Her accuracy rate across all operations, 98.3%. Her mission success rate, 100%. Not a single operator under her protection was lost. Morrison turned to face Sarah directly. The Navy Cross for extreme gallantry in combat, the Silver Star for valor, 3 Bronze Stars for merit, and the thanks of a nation that will never know your name. He pinned the medals on her chest himself, his hands steady despite his age. The applause started slowly, then built into thunder. Americans and British alike clapped, some with tears in their eyes. These were warriors who understood what those medals meant, the price paid for each one. Mason stepped forward from his formation. Every eye turned to him. He marched to Sarah, stopped, and executed the sharpest salute of his career. Not the mocking gesture from days before. This was respect, true and earned. Sarah returned it with equal precision. "I was wrong," Mason said loud enough for everyone to hear. "And I apologize." Sarah nodded once. "Apology accepted, Sergeant." They shook hands. The applause intensified. As the ceremony concluded and the formations dispersed, Morrison pulled Sarah aside. "Walk with me." They moved away from the crowd toward the empty rifle range. The sun was higher now, warming the desert air. "How do you feel?" Morrison asked. Sarah shrugged. "Like I've been exposed. The whole point of Ghost Unit was anonymity. The unit's disbanded, has been since 2019. The threats we hunted are neutralized. It's time for you to have a life again, Sarah. A real one." She looked at the distant targets, barely visible, heat shimmers. "I'm not sure I remember how." Morrison smiled sadly. "You'll learn. You're good at that." They walked in silence for a moment. "Ramirez has been digging," Morrison said casually. "Our IT specialist. Sharp kid." Sarah's expression didn't change. "How much does he know?" "Enough to be curious, not enough to be dangerous." "Yet?" Morrison stopped walking. "There's something you should know. We've received intelligence, encrypted communications. Someone's asking questions about Ghost Unit, using old code names, old protocols." Sarah's hand instinctively moved toward her sidearm. "Who? Don't know yet, but the messages reference 7 stars, and they're coming from inside the intelligence community." Sarah's jaw tightened. "A leak, or something worse." Morrison handed her a thin manila folder. "This is what we have so far." "Not much." Sarah opened it, scanning the contents quickly. Her face went pale. "This can't be right," she whispered. "I wish it wasn't." Across the base in the communications center, Ramirez's computer screen flickered. A new message appeared, routed through 7 proxy servers, encrypted with military-grade protocols. The message contained only 4 words: 7 stars will fall. Before Ramirez could respond, every light in the building went dark. The entire base plunged into silence. Morrison's office. Emergency lighting cast harsh shadows. Sarah sat across from him, the manila folder open between them. "Deputy Director Harold Croswell," Morrison said. "CIA, 40 years of service, impeccable record, 3 presidential commendations." Sarah stared at the photograph. Distinguished, silver-haired, grandfatherly. "This is who's compromised." "We don't know if he's compromised or if he's the threat himself." Morrison leaned back. "What we know is this: 6 weeks ago, Croswell requested archived files on Ghost Unit operations, specifically missions from 2016 to 2018. Those files don't exist, officially." "Exactly. Yet he knew to ask for them. Used protocols only 7 people should know." Morrison's expression darkened. "You, me, and 5 others who were read into the program." Sarah's mind raced. "The other Ghost Unit members being contacted as we speak. 4 are still active, different commands. One's teaching at Quantico. One," Morrison hesitated. "One died 3 weeks ago. Training accident at Fort Bragg." "That's convenient." Too convenient. Sarah closed the folder. What do you need from me? Morrison walked to his window overlooking the darkened base. Crosswell's hosting a classified intelligence conference in Berlin. Next week, all the major players will be there. CIA, MI6, Mossad, DGSE. You want me in Berlin? I want you watching him, reading him. He doesn't know Ghost Unit has been declassified. He thinks you're still ghosts, hidden. And if he's innocent, Morrison turned to face her, then we apologize and move on. But if he's not, his voice hardened. If he's selling Ghost Unit intelligence to foreign actors, if he's targeting the operators who trusted him, then we end this. Quietly, permanently. Sarah stood. I'll need a team. You'll have support, limited. This needs to stay off the books. Challery. She moved toward the door, then paused. General, why now? Why come after us now, years after the unit disbanded? Morrison's expression was grim. Because Ghost Unit eliminated people who were supposed to be untouchable. We broke rules, crossed lines, made enemies in very high places. Or maybe, Sarah said quietly, someone's afraid of what we know. Either way, Morrison replied, you need to find out before someone else dies. Sarah nodded, once her face hardening into the expression that had terrified enemies across 3 continents. Then let them come, she said. Ghosts don't exist, but we do. Outside, a military transport aircraft powered up its engines, preparing for departure. The sun set over the base, painting the sky in shades of blood orange. Somewhere in Berlin, Deputy Director Crosswell checked his watch and smiled. The hunt had begun. Have you ever been mocked only to prove everyone wrong? Share your story below and subscribe to honor the hidden strength inside us all. Because the most dangerous people are often the ones nobody sees coming until it's too late.